Good morning, you're welcome to this edition of Searching the Heart. I'm back here again to continue where I stopped from last week. Last week I was able to look at Nigeria and democracy as practiced in Nigeria. I was able to go through that historically and try to really see the issues that come up when we talk about what Nigeria truly is and what we can expect in terms of what are the models that we should encourage and the models we should not. Okay, so we discover that there is no hurry in trying to impose any cultures on the people in Nigeria if they have not by themselves really understood what they want as compared to what is really practical and what is really true. And I want to continue from there today by looking at why Nigeria is such a complicated duopolity. Okay, why is Nigeria such a complicated duopolity? Why do we have to go in detail looking at these facts, these historical facts, and the kind of the methods practiced in Nigeria, how the culture of Nigerians is practiced from day to day? Why doesn't it come so naturally for Nigerian people to develop like other nations? Let's say China, for instance, or India, for that matter. We normally would want to copy India, but they are doing far better in many areas, especially technologically, and in their understanding of what they should do concerning preserving their own eco-culture and also progress economically, industrially. They are doing far better than we are. Okay, and so these are the issues. Why are we not like South America, for instance? So these are the differences. Why is Nigeria such a complicated place? Okay, to understand this, we have to take the historical analysis. Well, look at the historical analysis again, as we did in the first episode. So first of all, we'll go right back and we'll look at the source of the black Negroid race. Okay, the source of the black or the Negroid race. And of course, the Negroid race itself is a very peculiar racial makeup. And of course, I'm not going to go into the details, but there is a particular stock of a racial stock that is referred to as Negro. Okay, and within this Negroid stock, there are sub-races within them. Many people don't know about this, but this is reality and it still exists up to today. And one race is referred to, of course, as the pygmy race, and the other race, they are more giantific in nature. Okay, so we have these two major parts within the Negroid race, which are mainly found within the African continent itself, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, we also have a third Negroid race, which is the Australian Aboriginal group. Okay, which is the third race in the different African sub-races within the Negroid race located on Africa, now on the African continent. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to go into the details of categorizing these different sub-races. Okay, but they are thought mainly to come from according to evolutionary scientists, they claim that these are all coming from the Australopithecus, of course, before it became Homo sapien, of course. So those are really very, very detailed descriptions. But of course, as you know, I am not, I don't take that view, that strict view of evolution. Okay, I do not believe that evolution was progressed in that very strict manner. There is no evidence for it whatsoever, in my view. That very long, drawn process where life kind of dragged along, there's just no evidence for it. Rather, there is evidence of a falls of various different civilizations. Even the evidence that the anthropologists and the archaeologists are bringing forward shows that there is very clear evidence of sudden fall of civilizations, while other civilizations existed, maybe on the ground, or some thrive in other continents, or others not thrive in other continents. There's very much evidence of that, but there's no evidence that life dragged along slowly through millions and millions of years. I just don't see it, especially with the survival of subgroups like within the mammals themselves, and groups like gorillas and chimpanzees, surviving alongside human species. Those for me are evidences of the relative youth of the life on Earth. Okay, in such a developed form. Okay, so those are things that can be argued out in another model, and I'll try to talk about it a little, especially as concerns carbon dating. I've talked about that in the book The Kingdom of Heaven, and I do not believe that carbon dating gives us all the details we need, especially concerning stratification of Earth layers. Together with Professor McIntosh, yes, who was formerly at the University of Liverpool. Yes, I'd rather pick his own view that carbon dating has some error in that point. Okay, the structures of the Earth may not reveal to us all we think that they do. Though the universe, and indeed the Earth, may be millions of years old, yes, but life, the evolution of life, is not that old. Okay, the evidence is not just there. Okay, there is evidence of evolution in things like the animals like the mud skipper, some ruminant animals show evidence of evolution. Some reptiles do show evidence of evolution, and all that, but it was not such a slow and dragged along process as millions and millions of years. There were animals such as the dinosaurs, massive animals, who, the virtue of their size, were only that massive because the Earth was full of a lot of vegetation, and of course could support their life and their life cycle. Yes, and there was a sudden collapse of that gave rise to the human, the dominance of the Homo sapien, and that evidence is very clear, of course. But there are other evidence that show that the existence of the Homo sapien was designed. Okay, in that very process was designed. It was made to happen. And evolutionary scientists try to dodge that. Like I heard recently, a lady on YouTube was trying to, really talk about the issue of the panda, which I have talked about here briefly. The panda is such an oddity in the whole of evolution. And of course, if you think of it that way, I believe that it goes to amplify my point. Yes, somebody must have designed some of these creatures to show that there's some intelligence behind it. So we'll continue after this. primates. Within the primate kingdom or family, if you like, we will find that there is a very close genetic similarity between primates and the existence of such developed primates such as gorillas and chimpanzees, to my mind, does not support that dragging along of evolution. I mean, it's just not there for me, millions and millions of years. I believe that human beings would have completely wiped out these species, if not for some spiritual thing. Now, when you go about these people down in the Cameroons, bordering Nigeria, and of course around those areas, that they try to live in harmony with these animals, and for them it is a spiritual relationship. Okay, so the existence of that harmony, even in my own tribe, there is that spiritual relationship between humans and animals, and so and the Indians to have that. So with that, you discover that there is something behind the preservation of these species, and that does not support evolution. Of course, it supports mainly creation. Okay, somebody behind the scene is teleguiding the preservation of these species. Okay, so this is just the what I wanted to the word primate just escaped my mind there. That's what I wanted to bring up. Okay, so of course the African races, the African races are made up of the Pygmies, the African Negroid, and the Afro-Asiatic races. Okay, yes, and the Afro-Asiatic races are more of the gigantic race, while the Pygmy is kind of short, not beyond 4 feet. And these races were distinct races within Africa themselves. But when you come to Africa today, you find out that most of them are mixed. Some still stay, of course. There are so many guys on YouTube here going to visit those areas, and they still encounter some of those separate races. Up in the Sudan, you find the more taller black races, and down around Central Africa, down towards Southern Africa, you find more shorter groups. Now, I am focusing today on Nigeria, and Nigeria is peculiar for a reason. In Nigeria, you see a very deliberate mixture of these people. A very deliberate mixture of these people. Unlike what you find in the Sudan, unlike what you find in South, in the Sudan, that great dichotomy between the races. You go up north, you find that the races are more slender, taller. Go down south, you find that they seem to be shorter. Maybe around Central Africa, going towards South Africa, shorter peoples. So this is the thing. But in Nigeria, you find them very much mixed. They have intermarried, and they are so mixed. So Nigeria is a place, it's a kind of a melting pot for all the races in Africa, for a reason, and we are not yet sure. Many people are not yet sure why this is so, and it takes somebody who is very, very observant to observe this. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the geographical sources for the people that live in Nigeria today. Okay, the geographical sources of the people that live in Nigeria today. One of the major sources, of course, of the people that live in Nigeria is Africa itself. Of course, Africa had, particularly the Pygmy tribes and the people of the Sudan. Okay, the people of the Sudan majorly make up the people in West Africa today, of course, and the people in Nigeria. And of course, they are very much interwoven and mixed with the Pygmy tribes. Okay, so these are the geographical source of the people here in Nigeria, majorly. But one very, very important source, which was sort of de-emphasized of recent, but actually exists, is the Middle Eastern source. Okay, which is mostly considered the Afro-Asiatic source. When you talk about Afro-Asiatic sources, you are talking of Middle Eastern sources. Now this is very, very important, okay? But you cannot also rule out the influence of the Australian / Asian Pacific source of the peoples of Africa. Now this is debatable yet, but there is a lot of evidence based on anthropological studies of historically linked peoples based on language, racial DNA makeup. That a lot of people of Africa actually come from the Asian continent via the Middle East, and some via the Asia Pacific or the West Indies, as it were. Okay, so this is very, very important. Okay, and why is this so? You have to understand why it is so before you can actually believe what I'm saying here. Okay, and of course we know that the evidence of the black race having existed somewhere around Mesopotamia in the time. This is from the Bible. Okay, this is also the Bible. Of course, I've told you my bias is more of the Bible than evolutionary science. Okay, while I am not discounting totally evolution, but I do not believe evolution was so dragged on. It went in leaps, in big leaps. Okay, in very big leaps, and that is the kind of evolution I would want to allude to, rather than the very dragged along evolution that most scientists want to believe happen. Okay, so yes, the geographical source of Africa is also very majorly from the Middle East races, and there's a reason for this. So I'm going to trace it down for us so that we can know the reason why so many of the tribes of Africa, and Africa as well as Nigeria today, has a lot of people from the Middle East. You have Arabs, okay, and a lot of people from the West Indies, and a lot of people from Africa itself, okay, after this. Great. There are a lot of information that is available to many of us today, especially some of the older anthropologists who first visited Africa. Some of that information, it was very glaring to them, but because of the tendency for such information to cause crises, some of it is being protected, as it were, and you must maybe attend a university, have a master's degree, some of these things before you can have access to some information. Okay, but there is information of many tribes on the African continent that are closely linked to even European tribes, European peoples, yes, and a lot of Asian links. Okay, so I'm going to continue from there, and we're going to be talking about dispersions. Okay, dispersions. I chose this word dispersion because dispersion is a biblical word. Okay, the word dispersion is the word that many theologians use to describe the dispersion of the people of Israel when they were taken captive by the Assyrians, and secondly, when the Jews were taken captive by the Babylonians. So I'm going to be using that word dispersion also to talk about African tribes, okay, because of the very close link African tribes have with Middle Eastern tribes. Okay, many of our people come from there, and up to today there are links with people there. Okay, so the first dispersion took place about not exactly, but about 3000 BC. Okay, and this dispersion is recorded for us in the Bible, of course the Torah, the Jewish Torah, about what was called the Tower of Babel. And this Tower of Babel was the first Babylonian empire. Okay, the first Babylonian empire that ruled over the whole world. And of course, the ancestor of the Jews, Abraham, came from this very place. Okay, and it's believed that all the races of the earth had one language at that time. Whether that language was Hebrew or was the Egyptian language or the Persian language, we don't know, okay? But they had a language which they spoke at that time. There's a lot of debate on which language was the original language of that time. Okay, some believe it was Hebrew. So they all had one language, and but they were dispersed after they began a project of building a tower, a very high tower that could get into heaven. Okay, and he said that the gods or God came down and he confused their languages, and because of that confusion they could not communicate with one another again, and they stopped building that city and that tower, and they dispersed into the earth. So the dispersion about 3000 BC took place, and that was the time somebody like Abraham, the father of the Jews, decided to travel from that location, which was Babylon, somewhere up in close to Iraq, of course, down into the land of Canaan, which was more towards the present position of Israel. And some of the locations he visited were Egypt, okay, Mesopotamia, of course, and all that. All right. So this is the history of that period. Okay, that was the first dispersion, and that first dispersion was the time of mixed races. The races were mixed together. Now, I have ignored the story before this point from Genesis 1, and I've picked from Genesis 11 because from Genesis 1 is more of oral tradition. Genesis 1 to Genesis 11 more of oral tradition, and there are a lot of things that we must look at by their own merit when we're considering oral tradition. Okay, so we pick from the more written history of a particular tribe, which is the Israelite or the Jewish people, and so we can now begin from there, and that is the first dispersion. And there is in fact historical archaeological evidence to show that the people, one of the major tribes of that time were black people. Okay, it is described very clearly even in the Bible, of course, of the existence of the black race around that place, around the Babylonian. They owned that area called Babylon today. Called Babylon at that time. Okay, so this is one of the evidences of the existence of black people. And today, when you go to India, when you go to Asia, South Asia, you find a lot of black, dark-skinned people. And for that very reason, okay, that there was a huge number of black people that lived around that area. Okay, today they are known as the Persians, but they were the original Babylonians. Okay, and we know also from the history of the Bible that it was the Persians that conquered the Babylonian Empire. Okay, and colonized it. Okay, so this is the evidence that we have of that. We'll continue from that. We have talked about the first dispersion. The first dispersion is recorded for us from no other than the Bible, and of course there are other sources which you can check yourself. Okay, now the second dispersion is the fall of Babylon. Okay, the kingdom called Babylon itself remained. It didn't just fizzle out of history, even though the tribes that belonged to it were scattered over the earth. Now I want to one thing of interest, of course, is the source which the Bible tries to see is one of those sources that all human beings came from the same source. Believe it or not, there is evidence of this. Genetically, linguistically, there's evidence genetically and there's evidence linguistically of this fact. Okay, the dates, however, of these dispersions are debatable. Okay, the dates are debatable, but there's evidence, linguistic evidence and genetic evidence of the singular source of all human beings. Okay, so this is that. And so we go to the second dispersion. Okay, and this second dispersion is the fall of Babylon in 530 BC. You see, a longer time. 3000 BC. See me jumping from 3000 BC to about 530 BC. And why is this great leap? Because most of the events between these period is very vague. Okay, as far as world history is concerned, it's very vague. Okay, and so that is why the only other evidence that we have of another dispersion of the black people from that point, which is Babylon, down into Africa, is in the second dispensation. Okay, in Babylon, 530 BC. Okay, this is when the king called Nebuchadnezzar attacked Judah, and in his attack of Judah, he took them captive twice, and he settled them in Judah. After his reign, his kingdom was conquered by the Persians. Okay, and we know where the Persians are today. Okay, very in proximity to Babylon itself. Okay, and of course there was another dispersion of black people, and that was one of the dispersions, I believe, the major dispersion that pushed a lot of the black people, down into India. Okay, down into Asia, down into the West Indies. Okay, and though many of them were already there, especially the ones south around Papua New Guinea, they were already there, but a lot of them that are India right now, were there at this second dispersion, were pushed there during this second dispersion. Okay, around 530 BC. Okay, so now, because of some of these things were because of the economic prosperity of that region, somehow human beings prospered more in areas of low density vegetation. Okay, they were afraid of the jungle because the jungle contained a lot of things like tsetse fly, that could have spread disease, and of course a lot of wild animals. And so they somehow human civilization prospered, in those semi-arid regions. Okay, and then we see it in Egypt and in Babylon. Okay, and so there was a lot of trade that was going on there, and most civilizations prospered there. Okay, and this is why most human beings located themselves there. Of course, there was a lot of vegetation there too at that time as compared to it now, but of course it was a more balanced area in terms of vegetation, and human beings thrived in those places. Okay, so this led to the third dispersion. Okay, the third dispersion, and the third dispersion was when the Caucasian race decided to play a more active role in human civilization, and this was the conquest of Alexander the Great in 336 BC. Okay, Alexander the Great invaded Babylon. Of course, Babylon had extended its empire right into parts of Europe, which is Turkey, of course, and Alexander the Great decided to invade this area, took over all the way into Babylon itself, and he established an empire there. Okay, and so this was the case, and this is the third dispersion. This caused a lot of people to move eastward and of course southward. Okay, and this opened the door for Europe. Okay, and of course the white or the Caucasian race to begin to dominate in the Middle East a little more. That was a major event that caused the dominance of a European group of people to begin to dominate a lot in the Middle East. And of course we know that up to today there are conflicts, scholarly conflicts, as to the existence of some Greek architecture, deep within that territory. And I believe that this happened at this time. Okay, it began to happen at this time and was now followed by the fourth dispersion. And the fourth dispersion was also the attack or the conquest of the Romans. Okay, the Romans also decided to venture into southward into Africa, and it is well known that at that point they virtually took over Libya, which Libya and Egypt, which was the major territory of the black civilization at that time. Okay, and they actually successfully conquered this place within the which is about 30 BC, very close to the time of Christ. Okay, and this happened way down. This continued way down up to about 512 BC. That is why you find that Africa, it is known that Africa actually participated, and blacks actually participated in the Christian Roman kingdoms that existed after Christ. You know, there was also a dimension of the black man that carried Jesus' cross. Okay, Simon of Cyrene. Okay, he carried Jesus' cross. Of course, the Ethiopians were always coming to for pilgrimage in Jerusalem. Okay, because they had interacted with King Solomon way back in around 700 BC. 800 to 700 BC. They had interacted with King Solomon, and they continued that relationship all the way to the 1st century. Okay, so AD. So this was the time when there was a lot of mixture in the races, just similar to the time of the first dispersion. The races mixed together very freely there in that location called the Middle East. Okay, that is the fourth dispersion. Okay, the Roman conquest was the fourth dispersion. And then there was a long lull, of course, a period, and which engulfed the Christian era. Okay, the advent of Jesus Christ down to the Christian era. Okay, and then came the fifth dispersion. And what is the fifth dispersion? The fifth dispersion is the Mohammedan era. Okay, where the Prophet Muhammad of Islam conquered that area, the Middle East. And this was the fifth dispersion. Okay, now as a result of this, we'll see what resulted at this point. Let's take a short break. Okay, this is about 512 AD. Okay, well, right when Muhammad began his conquest of the world and the fall of Christianity. Sorry, a little later than that. It began, but maybe way into the 6th century AD when he established himself, and this was the next dispersion. Although the Prophet of Islam accommodated black people, but some tribes can trace their migration from the Middle East to that conquest. Okay, maybe after Muhammad died, yes, they moved from the Middle East. It is known that many of the inroads back into the Middle East and even into Europe by the Mohammedan forces was by black peoples and black tribes. Okay, yes, but later on, because of disagreements within the caliphate and so on and so forth, we find that some of these people actually moved out of that area and moved back into the heart of Africa. Okay, and so some of those migrations are very early indeed. Okay, I mean very late indeed. Some of these tribes actually remember vividly those migration stories, of them coming from that area, specifically because of disagreements within the Mohammedan forces. Okay, so they did not accept that religion, and so they moved down. So this happened. So this is the fifth dispersion. Okay, this is the fifth dispersion. Now the sixth dispersion, and the sixth dispersion is a very popular one, or unpopular in that light, is the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, the era of a revived slave trade. and of course Africa had lost its unity, its perceived unity that many people believe existed before the coming of Islam. Okay, because the conquering of Christianity in Ethiopia and in Nubia, caused a kind of weakening of those two kingdoms, and which opened the door for the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, which a lot of European nations took advantage of the situation, and they raided the coastal regions of Africa and were involved in a lot of slave trade. And this period was, of course, known as the Dark. Began from the Dark Ages. Okay, it was not known as Dark Ages, but began from the Dark Ages. A lot of slavery, and of course, it culminated in the development of Europe, that was going through its own social and political revolutions at that period, being midwifed by Christianity. And of course, this caused the development of Europe itself. Okay, and as opposed to the Middle East. The Middle East was the center of civilization, but during the Dark Ages, Christianity kind of moved into Europe, dominated Europe, and caused a socio-cultural disturbance that brought Europe to where it is today. Okay, and within this period, the transatlantic slave trade took place, and of course many Africans were taken out of Africa to different parts of the world, all over the world. This is the sixth dispersion. Okay, and this of course contributed to the further weakening of the tribes within Africa, and the subsequent movement of these, the deliberate movement of these tribes towards this center, which is known as the heart of Africa, which is Nigeria. Okay, a lot of these tribes moved from South Africa upwards, away from the coastal areas. A lot of these tribes moved from East Africa inwards. Okay, a lot of them moved from North Africa inwards. Okay, and this is what caused the concentration of and mixing of so many of these tribes within the West African area. Okay, and sometimes too, when you look at it, it looks deliberate, as if somebody was actually deliberately mixing them around. Of course, you could have linked that to the Ethiopian and the Nubian kingdoms. It's possible the Ethiopian and Nubian kingdoms did that. Okay, but it's also possible that they mixed up by themselves, just to be in search of course, better places to settle, and within that they fought among themselves, intermarried among themselves. Of course, even war sometimes leads to intermarriage and all that. And so there's this very when you come to Nigeria, you find that the people are thoroughly mixed, racially and ethnically. So this is the problem that you see in Nigeria. Okay, so now we're going to go to the seventh dispersion, and of course we know the seventh dispersion, very popular, is colonialism. Okay, the one many of us refer to and every day. Okay, of course colonialism was responsible for so many things. Many Africans were again taken out of Africa, while some were brought back during the colonial period. Of course, some victims of the transatlantic trade were brought back to Africa during the colonial period. Some were also taken out. Okay, some just went for swimming for school abroad, never came back. Some went to fight the First World War. Of course, we know that. And all that. So that was the seventh dispersion. Okay, and we know some slavery too was taking place still. A little slavery was still taking place at that time. Okay, so after this we will now go. I will try to conclude this video vis-a-vis all these different stages of dispersion. Of course, why Nigeria is the way it is, very ethnically and racially diverse. Okay, it is sort of downstream to the world, if you look at it very carefully, vis-a-vis the movement, the way the world has developed. Okay, it is downstream. So every day there's kind of pressure moving this way. Okay, at a point it kind of moved that way, but again, as the Europeans moved into America, and tried to go to other areas of the world like Australia, but later it came back again because of the need for labor through the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, and pressure again was being put on all parts of Africa, and of course the people were moving towards a center, and that center is Nigeria. Okay, the present looking Cameroon, Nigeria, of course, around that area, Togo, Niger. So these are the truths of what really happened. Okay, so right now we are going to be looking at the ethno-racial reality of Nigeria of today. Today we have people in the ethno-racial reality of Nigeria today. Okay, of course, when you look at into Nigeria, when you go all over Nigeria, you discover that Nigeria has a lot of people who can trace their ancestry from different parts of the world. Up north, you find a lot of people who have clear, traceable Arab ancestry. Okay, part of the Hausa language, sometimes is combined with Arab. Okay, of course, this can be linked to the Usman Danfodio Jihad period of human. But yes, of course, we know that when Islam came down from the north through Mali and Sudan and all that, yes, it came into Nigeria that way, and some of the people were Arabs, clearly Arabs from North Africa, who found their way down into Nigeria, and some of them still are in Nigeria today, especially through the Fulani tribes, of course, and also intermarried with the Hausa tribes. Okay, and of course we can find that also in the Igbo people, okay, of eastern Nigeria. They are the one very peculiar set of people that a lot of evidence has been found of multiracial ancestry in the Igbo people. Of course, some of them are categorized as Jews, of course, but there's also very strong evidence, in my view, that they have South American ancestry, and some people have talked about that, about a lot of West African tribes, that in the ancient times, a lot of West African tribes are related closely with the South American tribes. And I feel, for me, I'm not an expert in this, but I feel that there are some genetic similarities to the South American tribes found in those areas, especially in eastern Nigeria. Okay, so you find that there very clearly, and also within the rest of Nigeria itself. When you read works from anthropologists that studied in Nigeria pre-independence, during the colonial period, you see that a lot of them, when they came to some parts of Nigeria, especially in the middle of Nigeria, they found tribes that for them looked like the Chinese. They were black, but like these are like black Chinese, and that was what they were really taken aback by this. While they will find certain that looked like Caucasian Europeans, black Caucasian Europeans, others looked like black Chinese. So there was that mixture. Especially in the writings of Meek. When you read Meek, you will see that he was really, really astounded by this reality. Okay, so they found a lot of that evidence of tribes that reminded them of other tribes. Of course, this is not evidence in itself, just because physically a tribe looks like another tribe somewhere. Of course, there is that racial dichotomy in the whole of humanity itself, based on color pigmentation, and it is not very clear why. Of course, it is said that in the tropics, the tribes that live in the tropics tend to have melanin, while those that live in temperate areas don't have melanin, but it's not always strictly that way. Okay, so this is just some of the things. So like saying a polar bear has white fur because it is living in snow. So this is the problem. Okay, so that is the thing. While in human beings it is more evidence to that, but it's not always so. Okay, so there is a lot of evidence of the multiracial identity of the people that are living in Nigeria, in the area called Nigeria. Okay, so with this evidence, now you can know that why it is so difficult to convince such a people of anything new. Nigerians are people that sort of tend to believe that they have seen everything already. Okay, there's that. It's so difficult. They seem to be simple at sometimes, but sometimes so difficult because they tend to have people who that confluence of different cultures from all over the world. It's like there's nothing they have not seen. Okay, they have not really experienced before. And yes, in that sense, they tend to be very trade savvy. Yes, you can buy anything you have, just bring it on. But in the sense of trying to convince them of any other theology or philosophy, it's very difficult because of that. Okay, that is the reason. It's because of that. Okay, and to round up, I want to tell you about something I interacted with on the street, and of course, it's called I called it the street trigger hypothesis. Okay. And this street trigger hypothesis claims, of course, because I found it on the street among mechanics, and claims that the shape of Africa is like a gun. When you turn it this way, pardon me to use this mic, you find that the bottom of Africa, the southern part, is the nozzle or the gun, and then the handle is right there around West Africa. And of course, Nigeria is located just at the trigger. So Nigeria is the trigger. Okay, so if you want to trigger a problem, of course you know where to go, to Nigeria. Okay, well, it's a kind of a joke. I perceive it as a kind of a joke, but it really made sense because at that time we were having some crisis in Nigeria, and it was affecting the whole world. Okay, but in my view, when I studied the evidence, in my view, I believe it is rather the opposite. Okay, Nigeria is rather downstream to all the world. Okay. Historically, it is provable. I just tried to do that. Okay, so the movement of people's historical movement navigating towards the heart of Africa, has given rise to this phenomenon where whatever happens around the world tends to, echo in Nigeria. And this is the problem. This is the real problem. It's not that Nigeria is the trigger. No, it's the rest of the world that kind of pushes all its dirt down into Nigeria. Okay, and so Nigeria is really downstream to that, and this is what we need to look at if we want to solve some problems in Nigeria. Okay, other people react differently to issues around the world. We tend to be very things come to Nigeria very slowly, and we tend to be very slow in accepting anything that comes around the world. Okay, and we need to look at this and know the reason why. Maybe this is the solution to the problems of Nigeria. I am David Tunji Chinke for you today in Searching the Heart.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.